In a stretch of southern New Jersey that many outsiders would mistake for tranquil suburbia, a hidden current of true crime and dark history has quietly spread its influence. Just beneath the neatly trimmed hedges and calm residential streets, an infamous syndicate with Sicilian roots orchestrates an elaborate and lucrative narcotics venture. This underworld secret involves names that lurk within the annals of organized crime: the Gambino faction, a group that operates under the shadow of a notorious heritage. Their story begins with ancestral connections to the Sicilian Mafia and leads directly into the heart of one of the most insidious heroin pipelines in history. Over time, their presence in neighborhoods like Cherry Hill, Delran, Mount Laurel, and Wildwood has morphed the local scene into a strategic command post for vast, illicit operations. Mediterranean-style villas, friendly pizzerias, and family gatherings serve as covers. In reality, an empire continues to grow through real mafia stories that hinge on drug smuggling, notorious kingpins, and old-world codes of silence. At the core of it all are cousins, in-laws, and childhood friends bound by blood. But they do not answer to any local authority. Their true allegiance is to high-ranking figures in Sicily, especially a complex figure recognized as Gaetano Badalamenti. By weaving cunning strategies, forging secret alliances, and demonstrating an unforgiving stance toward betrayal, these underworld power players have built a criminal tapestry that spans continents, the Sicilian link and the origins of a network. To understand this crime family drama, one must return to the old-world villages of Sicily. Generations ago, seeds of loyalty between certain mafia clans took root in the island's rugged landscapes. Those seeds would eventually blossom into relationships that crossed the Atlantic, shaping a notorious kingpin enterprise in the United States. People like Gaetano Badalamenti earned reputations as masterminds who rose in the ranks of the Sicilian Mafia. He was widely recognized for allegedly overseeing heroin laboratories, controlling distribution routes, and tightly enforcing traditional codes of omerta, the vow of absolute silence. His power was so extensive that when the Gambinos set foot in southern New Jersey, they pledged their loyalty to Sicily above all else. Instead of bowing to the New York-based leadership, they answered to this elaborate, infamous syndicate that had a global reach. When large shipments of heroin left clandestine labs in Palermo or Milan, they often ended up on American shores through multiple corridors. New York might have been the busiest port of entry, but when the narcotics filtered into the suburbs of New Jersey, those final steps were typically guided by the Gambino branch nestled there. They operated with an unquestioned directive: funnel the drugs safely through the region's discreet highways, camouflage them among everyday cargo, and keep them moving into the swirling markets of the Northeast and beyond. The players involved in this pipeline recognized that organized crime at such a grand scale demanded absolute trust, or else the entire structure could crumble. Betrayals were answered with swift, brutal consequences. The Gambino cousins and their suburban outposts. In the suburbs, names like Rosario Gambino, Giuseppe Yeppe Gambino, and Erasmo Gambino became synonymous, at least in law enforcement files, with large-scale narcotics trafficking. With them were distant relatives, including individuals like Emanuele Gambino and Antonio Gambino, who further cemented the clan's grip on daily operations. While some oversaw drug shipments, others kept an eye on local businesses to glean intelligence or launder illicit income. Pizzerias, bars, and modest eateries, often bearing family-related names, popped up across counties, employing illegal alien workers to reduce overhead and to keep certain dealings discreet. These workers, unwitting or otherwise, played their roles in a supply chain intricately connected to heroin distribution. To neighbors, the family might look like regular entrepreneurs pursuing their piece of the American dream. However, law enforcement listening in on suspicious phone calls heard code words refer to shipments of fresh pizza or mention bottles of champagne that were actually referring to potent narcotics. Movements of contraband often stemmed from the port in Brooklyn, then streamed quietly across highways until they nestled into the quiet corners of Cherry Hill. But behind every handshake was a labyrinth of secrecy. Those who threatened the group's stability or gave reason to suspect disloyalty sometimes vanished under suspicious circumstances or were found violently harmed, chilling reminders that underworld secrets can turn deadly. International connections and the role of Gaetano Badalamenti. Claims of global criminal influence center on Gaetano Badalamenti, a figure alleged to be an apex leader in Sicily's drug trade. Numerous investigators and government officials believed he was behind colossal volumes of heroin trafficking that reached the US from the 1960s onward. Evidence in various court documents spanning different countries depicted him as a man capable of shifting raw morphine from Southwest Asia through clandestine routes, eventually refining it into heroin in covert labs located across the Mediterranean and beyond. For a time, he lived life on the run, wanted in Europe for a multitude of charges, until authorities arrested him far from Sicily in Spain. That capture sent ripples through the entire network, including its offshoot in southern New Jersey. Many arrests followed, revealing how entangled the region had become in broader real mafia stories. Under Badalamenti's direction, the production model relied on smugglers, chemists, distributors, and close associates in the US who specialized in laundering money. Often, sums of illicit cash were wired to secret bank accounts in Switzerland or concealed in shipments that returned to Italy, fueling further heroin production. Covert transcripts later made public in court suggested that the Gambinos in southern New Jersey maintained direct lines to these high-level Sicilian operators. One slip, one misstep in this chain could invite lethal reprisal, something proven by an ongoing record of unsolved mysteries and violent episodes that surfaced in both Sicily and the United States. Convenient fronts, the pizza parlors and roving containers. One hallmark of this infamous syndicate was its cunning use of everyday businesses. Pizza shops, scattered from Cherry Hill to AC, were not merely casual eateries. Despite serving genuine food, certain parlors allegedly doubled as nerve centers for drug distribution. Employees, equally comfortable tossing dough, might have also moved covert packages through back doors or hidden compartments in delivery vehicles. Authorities eventually labeled this phenomenon the pizza connection, a phrase that came to embody how cunning and adaptability can transform a mundane environment into an elaborate front for narcotics. But the creativity did not stop with pizza parlors. According to investigators, shipments of heroin were sometimes snuck through customs inside nondescript packages. At times, lead-lined boxes prevented detection by X-rays. On other occasions, the contraband was mislabeled as music tapes or placed in the trunk of well-worn vehicles that were being shipped or driven in from overseas. Those who specialized in logistics within the Gambino group did everything in their power to ensure that each new wave of supply reached suburban New Jersey intact. The payoff was astounding, sometimes valued at millions of dollars in a single month. Violent enforcement and the fate of turncoats. When dealing with organized crime, there is always the question of how the hierarchy keeps everyone compliant. In these real mafia stories, the answer is as predictable as it is unnerving: fear. For the Gambino clan in southern New Jersey, secrecy was safeguarded by ruthless enforcement. Stories soon surfaced of individuals found dead under brutal circumstances when their loyalty was questioned. For instance, law enforcement discovered certain members, known by last names like Senena, lying in car trunks, shot execution style. Each discovery was a grim cautionary tale that in a world ruled by notorious kingpins, betraying the group or mishandling sensitive operations often results in irreversible consequences. Various unsolved homicides made local and national headlines. Some men connected to these circles were found executed, while in other cases they disappeared entirely. These incidents were not random. The victims usually had close ties to the illicit supply chain. Rumors swirled of internal disputes over lost shipments or conflicts about revenue splits. Everyone understood that the Gambino network's code demanded unwavering dedication. Anyone who faltered risked being labeled a liability. Law enforcement transcripts from wiretaps revealed conspirators expressing dread about making mistakes or trusting law enforcement decoys. This anxiety fueled the climate of intimidation that enveloped all of them. The major arrests and the role of undercover agents. It was only a matter of time before federal and state authorities turned their full attention to the underworld secrets swirling in southern New Jersey. Meticulous investigations took shape, incorporating undercover agents, wiretaps, and surprising sting operations. On one particular December evening in 1983, an undercover operative supposedly struck a deal with a member of the Gambino group who bragged about having access to heroin of exceptional purity. This insider also revealed that failure to meet monthly quotas, sometimes in the range of millions of dollars, could be deadly. In the months that followed, investigators recorded multiple narcotics transactions, capturing details about clandestine meetings and the cast of characters supporting them. Law enforcement eventually executed coordinated raids in mid-March 1984, orchestrating simultaneous crackdowns across New Jersey. The timing was crucial. They arrested several figures believed to be essential cogs in the heroin trade. Among them were individuals with the last name Gambino and their close associates. High-profile arrests, including certain men posted at $10 million bail, underscored the severity of the accusations. At a major press conference in Newark, one of the leading U.S. attorneys declared that the authorities had intercepted an estimated $2 million worth of heroin and cocaine, with strong evidence pointing back to Sicily as the main source. Courtroom revelations and the Transatlantic web. Once the cases reached the courts, a trove of translations from Sicilian dialect revealed how the group communicated in code. Conversations about fresh pizza or bottles of champagne unfolded around phone lines they wrongly believed were secure. Additional transcripts showcased how certain Gambino relatives in Cherry Hill conferred with contacts in Atlantic City casinos to finalize deals. Meanwhile, their collaborators engaged in counter-surveillance, scouring hotel lounges to see if any suspicious individuals were snooping. In one revealing instance, an undercover agent negotiated for nearly a kilogram of heroin during a tense hotel rendezvous, while distant watchers tried to ensure no police stings were in play. The web stretched across multiple states too, with references to out-of-state bosses who orchestrated the enterprise from hidden vantage points. The prosecutions further unveiled a global dimension to the clan's dealings. A multi-jurisdictional dragnet in the US and Europe led to arrests of top-level conspirators charged with shipping vast amounts of narcotics. Some faced charges of funneling hundreds of pounds of heroin annually into American cities, all under the broader influence of the Sicilian Mafia. Lawyers defending them argued various angles, from entrapment claims to pointing out American laws not applying overseas. But the collective weight of evidence, wiretaps, seized contraband, bank records, often painted an unflattering portrait of an organized crime juggernaut fueled by heroin's immense profits. The historical context, from the French connection to the pizza connection. This was not the first time law enforcement faced a major wave of heroin distribution orchestrated by Sicilian conspirators. Decades earlier, a series of events infamously dubbed the French Connection saw massive shipments move through France into the US. Many of the same characters or their mentors had been implicated at some stage. Figures like Badalamenti were rumored to have participated in older episodes of drug trafficking. Over time, these organizations refined their methods. Labs emerged in new locations, distribution routes changed, and money laundering tactics grew more sophisticated. By the early 1980s, a new era of infiltration was underway. The pizza connection deeply involved the very people who had sharpened their teeth during those earlier heroin rings. Investigators and media outlets gradually realized just how significant the Sicilian network had become. Some prosecutors referred to it as the largest foreign-based criminal consortium exporting addictive substances to the United States. Indeed, the scale of the profits dwarfed even elaborate bank heists or other high-flying illegal schemes. And southern New Jersey, with its suburban calm, was a perfect place to finalize deals and conceal money flows. Carlo Gambino's legacy and the shift to Paul Castellano. It's impossible to recount real mafia stories in America without referencing Carlo Gambino, once hailed as a quiet but immensely respected figure within La Cosa Nostra. The older generation recognized him as the boss of the largest crime family in New York City during his lifetime. With cunning displays of diplomacy, he formed alliances across multiple crime families, including the Philly territory once ruled by Angelo Bruno. Over the years, Carlo Gambino's younger cousins, second cousins, and loyal allies found it advantageous to branch out to suburban regions of New Jersey. Ties were further solidified through property deals and business partnerships that blurred lines between legitimate commerce and illegal trade. After Carlo Gambino passed away in the mid-1970s, leadership in New York eventually fell to Paul Castellano. Meanwhile, the related crew in southern New Jersey followed their own path. Their loyalty did not revolve solely around official lines of the typical mafia hierarchy, but remained tethered to the old-world commands of influential Sicilian families. Some watchers speculated that these transplanted Sicilian groups wanted the best of both worlds, recognition by their American counterparts, as well as direct pipelines to powerful drug bosses in Palermo. In effect, these Gambino relatives carved out a unique zone between Philly's territory and New York's main seat. Angelo Bruno's influence and the grant of territorial access. Traditionally, the Philadelphia crime family exercised authority over all of southern New Jersey. However, in an unusual arrangement, the Gambino contingent found ways to coexist. Rumor holds that this was made possible through cooperation between Angelo Bruno and the Gambinos. Close personal ties, family friendships, shared ventures in real estate, and the silent understanding that both groups benefited from the heroin flow, reduced friction. Although Bruno was eventually assassinated in 1980, the relationships he had established in earlier years left a lasting imprint. By operating in frequented tourist spots like Wildwood and Atlantic City, the Gambinos could tap into a broad consumer market for narcotics and gambling without waging direct turf wars with their neighbors. This tacit acceptance did not mean there was no tension. Some watchers believed that behind the scenes, small rifts brewed over who controlled specific local rackets. But never did these disagreements erupt into the all-out violence sometimes witnessed in clan feuds. Instead, the New Jersey Gambinos followed the unspoken rules, funneling significant revenue up the chain, while the Philadelphia group recognized the advantage of letting them handle drug shipments and distribution that arrived from Sicily. Sticking to these unwritten codes preserved a fragile peace, even as these crime families raked in colossal sums from heroin's unstoppable demand. Heroin's journey, from Afghan morphine to suburban side streets. A complex global route stood behind each bag of heroin that landed in a suburban home. Agricultural fields in the Middle East or Southwest Asia yielded poppies that were refined into morphine. That product was then transported across continents, sometimes stashed in trucks or ocean vessels, until chemistry experts in Italy further refined it into heroin. Unmarked labs hidden in remote corners of Sicily or mainland Italy were believed to be the last step in turning raw morphine into a highly lucrative, addictive substance. With alarmingly high street value, each kilo of heroin that landed in the tri-state area looked like a gold mine to those controlling the pipeline. It's easy to picture safe neighborhoods, family barbecues, kids riding bikes, and weekend soccer games. Meanwhile, behind closed doors in certain residences, high-level summits orchestrated the final stage in that product's distribution. Vehicles might leave New York Harbor or an airport loaded with cleverly concealed packages. Once they reached local safe houses, smaller quantities would be broken down by just a few trusted hands, awaiting further distribution to other states. The synergy between Sicily's supply chain and the American demand environment produced a revenue phenomenon that dwarfed many legitimate industries. The rise of investigations and international collaboration. As the heroin problem surged, governments around the world increased cooperation. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, law enforcement agencies in the U.S. teamed up with Italian counterparts to share intelligence on these infamous syndicates. They recognized that the Mafia in Sicily wielded extreme levels of violence, targeting police officials, judges, prosecutors, or anyone who threatened their empire. The repeated assassinations of high-ranking officials in Palermo underscored the Mafia's fearsome capabilities. Investigators tapped the help of interpreters and cultural liaisons who could navigate the intricacies of the Sicilian dialect. This synergy produced a clearer view of how these crime families were structured and how they laundered their profits. Eventually, FBI officials, the DEA, the New Jersey State Police, and other specialized units took aim at the Gambino cluster in South Jersey. Wiretap warrants allowed them to capture revealing phone calls. Informants, sometimes from the periphery of these clans, provided key insights. Stolen glimpses into daily routines showed how swiftly shipments were coordinated, how money was sent overseas, and which code words indicated changes or potential infiltration. Moments of confusion or fear in these recordings further showed how deeply the group dreaded getting caught. A tidal wave of indictments and sweeping arrests. The door to large-scale prosecutions swung open once Gaetano Badalamenti himself fell into police custody while traveling in Europe. As authorities moved to file sweeping indictments, the American branch was also hit with a tsunami of charges. Federal attorneys carefully pieced together conspiracies, linking phone conversations and logbooks to seized heroin shipments. Suspects from major U.S. cities faced the same charges as remote conspirators across Italy. The consistent theme was a blueprint that adhered to standard mafia codes: family loyalty, a hunger for profit, and lethal responses to disobedience. Simultaneously, the so-called Catalano faction, an extension of the Bonanno family in New York, also faced intense scrutiny. These investigators discovered that multiple mafia families in the area had benefited from that same Sicilian pipeline. Within the swirl of overlapping investigations, documents highlighted the cross-pollination between the Bonannos, the Gambinos, and other old-world constituents. The exact boundaries of each family's territory sometimes looked blurred, yet they all recognized how vital the Sicilian supply chain remained. From the vantage point of law enforcement, it seemed that Badalamenti's empire alone had enough manpower and narcotics to feed them all. Rivalries, internal tensions, and mounting body counts. Though these unsolved mysteries typically remain entangled in half-whispered rumors, the high-stakes nature of drug deals inevitably spawned conflicts. Rival factions might jockey for a larger share of distribution rights or protest a minor slight. The chain of loyalty might break if someone believed particular shipments were being skimmed, or if an ambitious underling tried to bypass the official chain of command. Tales of men found murdered in cars or discovered in rural areas with bullet wounds to the head circulated widely. The slayings of Salvatore and Matteo Sinena in southern New Jersey stand out as prime examples. Law enforcement concluded that these events stemmed from internal disputes. The murders, within days of each other, echoed the typical mafia method of eliminating immediate threats and preventing revenge. Some of those targeted by lethal force held crucial knowledge of how the pipeline operated, how much money was involved, or who was orchestrating deals behind the scenes. Others might have committed the cardinal sin of talking to authorities or misplacing a large sum. Investigators discovered recurring patterns in these underworld hits. The victims all had ties to the same overarching structure, one that valued secrecy more than anything else. The deeper authorities delved, the more they realized that nearly everyone in the Gambino group was linked by blood or marriage to the overarching Sicilian network. The ties were unbreakable and lethal if tested. Pizza parlors in the Midwest and the Eagle Cheese Company. While the southern New Jersey group turned local pizzerias into docking points for narcotics, their associates replicated the concept in other parts of the country. Chicago, Detroit, and Philadelphia each boasted pizza shops under suspicious ownership. A major figure named Salvatore Catalano coordinated efforts out of Queens, while cousins and nephews operated other businesses that doubled as depots. One operation famously involved a cheese company in Brooklyn. Investigators alleged it was used to move shipments and launder proceeds. Another ring involved pizzerias in the Midwest, staffed by individuals who often had direct roots in the same Sicilian towns that produced the Gambinos and their extended families. These discoveries showed how the pizza connection aspect of these organized crime groups transcended one city or even one family. The real brilliance lay in the simplicity. Pizza restaurants, by their nature, handled large volumes of deliveries and supplies, making them a perfect cover for funneling covert packages. Additionally, the public would rarely suspect these humble establishments as key stations for a multi-million-dollar heroin circuit. Law enforcement eventually realized that whenever a suspect planned to open a new pizzeria, it was wise to keep an eye out for possible expansions of the pipeline. The Bonannos, the Gambinos, and the shifting tide of power. Although the 5 traditional families of La Cosa Nostra in New York, Bonanno, Colombo, Gambino, Genovese, and Lucchese, each had unique leadership, they could all benefit from the flood of Sicilian heroin. Historically, the Bonanno family had strong Sicilian roots, which partly explains how members like Salvatore Catalano or Cesare Bonventre were deeply involved in these conspiracies. Meanwhile, the Gambino family had assembled its own transatlantic connections. Inter-family relationships were complicated, leading to short-lived alliances and secret feuds. One well-known figure, Carmine Galante of the Bonannos, tried to seize absolute power over the heroin trade, but met a violent death in 1979. Once that vacuum appeared, control of various operations shifted rapidly. The introduction of so many Sicilian transferees reinvigorated these families. They brought direct contact with the old country, plus innovative smuggling techniques. However, they also imported a vicious brand of discipline that soared to new levels of cruelty. The resulting Sicilian faction wars triggered a wave of internal bloodshed within the Bonanno ranks. Bodies began turning up across the tri-state region. Some had direct connections to shipping fiascos or mishandled transactions. Others were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. The Gambino associates in southern New Jersey tried to insulate themselves, focusing on their relationships with Badalamenti, Bucetta, Inzerillo, and other Sicilian bigwigs, sidestepping the more chaotic environment that was boiling over in certain corners of New York. Shattered illusions, suburban life under siege. Many local residents in Cherry Hill and Delran found it extraordinary that such darkly tangled organized crime stories could unfold in their midst. The quiet family life in these locales, home to chain supermarkets and tidy public parks, seemed worlds away from bullet-riddled vendettas. Yet behind ornamental fences and manicured lawns, a network of foot soldiers, capos, and high-level brokers spent daytime hours living as mild-mannered neighbors. At night, though, they might travel to secret gatherings, finalize drug deals, or check in with the notorious kingpins who shaped the entire enterprise. Some had children enrolled in local schools who excelled in sports. People who knew them personally often recalled friendly gestures or charitable donations. This strong veneer of normalcy proved an ideal camouflage. By the time law enforcement realized how deep it all went, the enterprise had been funneling heroin for years, making untold fortunes. Certain pizzerias or restaurants became local staples, beloved for good food, while also operating as clandestine channels for dope. Occasionally, locals working side jobs at these establishments might stumble upon suspicious activity and quietly back away, not wanting any trouble. If they asked too many questions, cryptic threats or ominous stares might finalize their silence. While rumors persisted, actual confirmation arrived only when the raids and arrests started making headlines. Internal structures and the Mafia's code. Despite the infiltration of modern technology, wiretaps, advanced policing, and cross-border alliances, the underworld secrets of the Sicilian-centered mafia structure remained formidable. The code of silence, or omerta, was taught from generation to generation. Traditional rituals inducted new made men, solidifying gang hierarchies that rarely changed. For instance, certain men were recognized as capo regimes who commanded squads of soldiers, while other loyal associates provided muscle or logistical support. Indeed, in southern New Jersey, the designation of capo was not an empty title. A man recognized as such could direct major shipments, manage tens of thousands of dollars, and even order the elimination of a traitor if needed. Relatives by blood or marriage formed the foundation of genuine trust. This extended to the Inzerillo and Bucetta families, who were entrenched in drug smuggling. Some had parents or uncles who had made their mark decades ago, forging a cycle of continuity that flourished among these crime families. The synergy between these families could be seen in how they distributed tasks. One side handled finances, while another specialized in negotiating with kidnappers or facilitating the escape of fugitives. This structure gave them resilience and adaptability even after multiple arrests. Removing one leader sometimes did little to hamper overall operations because of how seamlessly another relative could step in. The web of fugitive hideouts. Fleeing from the law was commonplace among these conspirators. With strong cross-continental relationships, many indicted persons simply jumped back to Sicily. Some used forged passports to reach South America. Others found sanctuary in rural corners of Italy. They often maintained multiple safe houses, rotating between them to stay a step ahead of pursuit. The authorities found that capturing a fugitive required not just local raids, but coordinated efforts with Interpol and foreign police forces. For example, when Badalamenti was eventually discovered in Spain, it was the result of extended collaboration between different agencies. Cases like his illustrated the real complexity of dismantling an underworld enterprise that had infiltration routes everywhere. Judicial documents recounted how fugitives might reappear at random, living under assumed identities with the help of sympathetic relatives. In some cases, they intended to continue overseeing their slice of the drug network from afar. Collecting intelligence on these men was like tracing a labyrinth that spanned multiple continents. Authorities sometimes tried to flip lower-ranked participants to reveal safe-house locations, but fear of violent retribution, combined with unwavering devotion to the clan, made recruits reluctant to talk. As a result, large portions of these unsolved mysteries remain elusive, even when partial indictments are filed. Retaliation and the endless cycle of blood. In the Sicilian Mafia world, vengeance is a persistent reality. If someone was suspected of betrayal, or if a transatlantic bust cost the group a fortune, the retribution could be merciless. The sudden murders of the Sinena brothers in New Jersey demonstrated the unbreakable link between local events and the old country hierarchy. These men, who carried extended family ties to Badalamenti, ended up paying a steep price. Some say it was a direct outcome of their involvement in bungled shipments or perceived betrayals. The wave of violence that followed cast a chilling shadow over the entire organization, warning others never to show disloyalty. The toll extended beyond the direct victims. Family members worried endlessly about becoming collateral damage. Even children might sense the tension in the air, noticing abrupt hushes when certain topics arose. Meanwhile, law enforcement strove to decipher whether particular murders signaled an internal power struggle or if they were simply retributive hits from Sicily. Observers recognized that from the mid-1970s to the mid-1980s, headlines about mafia slayings in the region soared. The phenomenon was hardly random, anchoring the dark history that shaped local attitudes toward outsiders with Sicilian connections. High-level observers and Senate testimony. By the early 1980s, the infiltration of Sicilian organizations into New Jersey's underbelly had grown so severe that officials began testifying before the United States Senate Judiciary Committee. Prominent law enforcement officers described, under oath, how the Gambinos in South Jersey were orchestrating drug importation and forging strong allegiances with Sicilian clans. They highlighted that these clans displayed unimaginable wealth, living in upscale communities. Lavish homes that seemed ordinary from the outside were actually financed by the sale of notorious kingpin's primary commodity, heroin. These testimonies helped shape policy decisions, fueling calls for stricter border checks, expanded wiretap authority, and advanced cross-Atlantic policing agreements. In their statements, officials delineated the structure, listing capo regimes, soldiers, and associates. They recounted details of large heroin seizures that could be traced to the group, as well as the cunning methods used to transport contraband from Italy. They walked senators through the elaborate distribution chain that ended in local pizza parlors, disco clubs, and bars. In these retellings, the name Gambino cropped up again and again, tethered to the concept of unstoppable narcotics flow. The hearings provided a public glimpse into the underworld secrets for those who had never before imagined such an organized labyrinth in the peaceful suburbs. External collaborators, the buses, Inzerillos, and Adamitas. Outside the immediate Gambino surname, many families intertwined in these illicit dealings. The Bucettas, Inzerillos, Sinenas, Adamitas, all connected in complicated webs of marriage, mafia tradition, and shared obligations. Some members set up businesses in various states, from Virginia to California. Others had direct responsibilities in trucking routes or were known to handle specialized tasks like forging documents for new arrivals. In Sicily, the clan of each family typically had standing alliances or historical feuds. The result was a tapestry of networks so dense that unraveling one thread rarely collapsed the entire enterprise. For example, the Inzerillo lineage was rumored to be heavily involved in savage feuds in Palermo, fueling speculation that the lines of conflict eventually traveled across the ocean to New Jersey. The Adamita family was seen supporting certain real estate acquisitions and gained partial ownership in Atlantic City clubs. People like Domenico Adamita or Emanuele Adamita faced charges in Italy that mirrored those faced by their cousins on U.S. soil. Meanwhile, the Buchetta family was well known for its patriarch's expertise in international trafficking, having connections in multiple countries. Each clan, despite geographic separation, appeared to trust in the old-world vow of loyalty over any local obligations. Courtroom dramas and suicides in custody. With so many arrests and ongoing cases, the courthouse drama seemed non-stop. Some indicted individuals languished behind bars in the U.S., facing multi-million-dollar bail amounts. Rumors circulated about frantic attempts to gather enough funds or assets to post bail. One story that captured headlines involved an enraged suspect who, convinced that mistakes had put him in the crosshairs of his own family, tried to take his own life in a jail cell. The alleged reason? Fearing confrontation with more powerful members who lost trust in him. Legal proceedings often revealed these internal terrors. Prosecutors hinted that the suspect had actually been under a death sentence from his superiors, an unspoken penalty for endangering the operation. Spectators were astonished at the breadth of the accusations. Some attorneys argued that the evidence was built on surveillance that skirted constitutional lines. Others said that coded phone calls were open to misinterpretation. Nevertheless, the volume of corroborating proof, heroin seized in multiple regions, phone logs pointing to repeated communications with Sicilian numbers, and repeated mention of coded references convinced many judges and juries that these were not mere coincidences. The trials dragged on for years, with some defendants flipping in exchange for reduced sentences, though others defiantly kept silent, true to the Mafia code of secrecy. The legacy of heroin conduits and ongoing mysteries. Even after a wave of convictions, the bigger question remained. How thoroughly had the pipeline been destroyed? Some skeptics believed that the well-worn routes for shipping drugs from Sicily to the U.S. were far too established, and new players were ready to step in where older associates had fallen. Indeed, taped phone calls and officer depositions repeatedly implied that if Gaetano Badalamenti or certain Gambino figures were locked up, a nephew or second cousin might quietly maintain the pipeline. Sources in law enforcement often stated that removing one key figure only caused a ripple of short-term panic before the rest of the structure restabilized. Over the decades, the southern New Jersey faction of the Gambino Empire evolved, adapting to shifting conditions. Some of the old guard had died, some were deported, and others faded into obscure retirement. Nevertheless, the region's dark history overshadowed new waves of Sicilian transplants. For local citizens, the saga served as a lesson. Behind the quiet exteriors of suburban life could lurk a true crime labyrinth of transnational drug trafficking. The memory of these extensive arrests, with headlines shouting about tens of millions of dollars worth of heroin, remains vivid among longer-term residents. The feudal lords of hidden suburbia. When historians of real mafia stories look back, they often describe the Gambinos in southern New Jersey as modern feudal lords who once oversaw a drug kingdom from behind seemingly nondescript front doors. Their children attended local schools, while their foot soldiers escorted shipments of heroin to major distribution points in the Northeast. Shell corporations, property acquisitions, and forged documentation kept authorities chasing an elusive phantom. And through it all, the clan's ties to the infamous syndicates of Sicily never broke. If anything, adversity might have strengthened their unity, reaffirming that loyalty to the old country was paramount. These characteristics highlight the resilience of the structure and explain how it managed to surpass the difficulty of operating in a place with heavy law enforcement scrutiny. Suburban policing might have been well-funded, but many officers lacked the specialized knowledge to identify embedded organized crime networks with sprawling international ties. By the time specialized units stepped in, the syndicate had grown deeply rooted. The entire story underscores a painful reality. High-level heroin trafficking can remain hidden in the plainest settings if participants stand united under a code of fear, loyalty, and blood ties. The burning question: was justice truly served? One might ask, Did the arrests, the trials, and the imprisonments truly dismantle the pipeline? Or did it merely scatter the players, prompting them to adapt and re-emerge under fresh identities? In the broader scope of unsolved mysteries, the permanence of these takedowns is debated. Countless investigations tried to prove that, although individual cells were neutralized, the system behind them never fully disappeared. Prosecutors sometimes conceded that the day after large raids, certain replacements would already be waiting. Observers suspect that modern technology and diversified shipping methods have only made it simpler for successors to pick up the trade. Yet the sensational scale of the mid-1980s crackdowns remains a testament to law enforcement collaboration, echoes in modern times. While the primary events of these dark history chapters trace back to the 1970s and 1980s, their ripple effects linger. Today, references to the pizza connection or the southern New Jersey Gambinos still provoke reactions among true crime enthusiasts and investigators. Researchers consult dusty court records and taped transcripts, searching for lessons in how organized crime networks adapt. Truth be told, each new revelation about multi-region narcotics infiltration often has an echo in these older sagas. They exemplify how cunning, layered webs can breach national boundaries, and how blood ties magnify loyalty to the point of near indestructibility. Citizens in Cherry Hill, Delran, Wildwood, and elsewhere now live with the knowledge that the region once served as a hub for a real mafia story. The details, secret huddles in casino lounges, code words uttered in hushed phone calls, shimmering oceans of black market cash, seem straight from a cinematic thriller. And yet, it was real, playing out in everyday places. In the annals of infamous syndicates, the Gambino family's activities in southern New Jersey remain an eye-opening demonstration of how easily global organized crime can blend into local communities. Continual shifts in power. Following repeated legal blows, some crucial players either died in prison or were deported to face justice in Italy. A few struck deals with prosecutors, inadvertently helping dismantle smaller cells. Meanwhile, their children's generation either moved on to legitimate businesses or tried to keep a lower profile, possibly shielding themselves from the repercussions of their parents' criminal heritage. In Sicily as well, the mafia climate fluctuated. Key arrests, combined with internal strife, weakened the once tight leadership. Yet, new alliances or mergers sometimes resurrected networks once thought eliminated. Even if the southern New Jersey hub no longer operates as robustly as it did decades ago, the stories and the legends persist like echoes in a hidden canyon. When new forms of illicit trafficking, such as synthetic opioids, appear, the blueprint established by these older groups sometimes re-emerges, adapted for fresh methods. Observers recall that the cross-Atlantic pipeline was not just about money, but about generational fidelity. Some rumors suggest that, expatriated or not, certain old family members maintain contacts, quietly guiding younger counterparts into updated versions of the enterprise. Whether that is fact or speculation remains an open question. Still, for those who follow true crime sagas and the dark history of mafia life, the notion that old ghosts might haunt new markets is never far-fetched. The Gambino story, retold. In the end, the Gambino clan's narrative in southern New Jersey is a cautionary tale about how organized crime can flourish wherever strong bonds of kinship and unscrupulous greed converge. From Cherry Hill's leafy boulevards to Delron's discreet residences, from pizzerias to motel rooms in Atlantic City, these families illustrated the unstoppable lure of quick wealth. With them came a deadly cost: fear, assassination, and ceaseless secrecy. Relatives like Rosario, Giuseppe, Erasmo, and others emerged as central figures, their arrests marking headlines. Yet behind those arrests lay an even larger cast, countless individuals quietly participating or providing backup to maintain a pipeline that spanned oceans. This saga also highlights the unstoppable drive of law enforcement agencies who, through sting operations and joint crackdowns, accomplished unprecedented seizures of heroin and the dismantling of major cells for a time. Courts functioned as battlegrounds where each side fought with everything from wiretap evidence to claims of entrapment. In the swirl of it all, the public got a glimpse of carefully kept underworld secrets. The watchers realized that a demure house with a manicured lawn could hide kilos of narcotics or wads of untraceable cash. No region, no matter how apparently safe, was truly beyond the reach of infamous syndicates guided by old-world codes of silence. Final contemplations. This chronicle, composed of tense negotiations, betrayals, and lethal enforcements, belongs solidly among the pantheon of real mafia stories. Some details remain unraveled, locked within the sealed lips of those who valued loyalty more than their own freedom. Others may get clarified if future official documents are unsealed or if a remorseful participant decides to talk. What stands clear is the scale and sophistication of this network, a phenomenon that most average citizens struggled to fathom. Driven by notorious kingpins from Sicily, the entire machine exemplified the synergy of globalization well before the term became fashionable. Though decades have passed, the rise and fall of the Gambino crime family in southern New Jersey continues to capture the fascination of true crime buffs and historians alike. It teaches us that organized crime doesn't merely thrive in back alleys, it can nestle comfortably in sunny suburbs, blending in with soccer moms and barbecue get-togethers. It can masquerade behind the scents of fresh pizza dough, making insiders wonder if the extra toppings might be code for something far more dangerous. Ultimately, the dark history of this group stands as a testament to the unmatched adaptability of infamous syndicates when fueled by the promise of fortune and sealed by blood loyalty. Even to this day, one can ask, have the real lessons here been fully learned? Or do these cycles of smuggling, concealment, and hidden power simply bide their time, waiting for the next unsuspecting moment to resurface?